I'm like, what do you mean business owners don't understand the business of business? Like, how do you run a business and not understand how to make money? I mean, that just seems so absurd to me. And I started to investigate and I'm like, wow, this is a real problem. It's one that I can solve. The story in Profit First is how I built my wealth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. For the last time, no, we are not stopping the podcast, but we're making a big change. We have a big announcement to make. The Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast is becoming the Purpose Matrix. Due to your feedback, this shift reflects our broader mission. We're not just about real estate. Our mission is to inspire and educate others to live their God-given purpose, whatever that is for you. We'll talk about real estate, but as you've noticed, we love to talk business, leadership, mindset, and we like to talk about this for every area of life, including business, but faith, family, and fitness as well. We really appreciate your loyalty and your input. Without you, this evolution could not have happened. You helped shape this. We can't wait to bring you even more valuable conversations. New name, bigger mission, bigger impact. For today's guest, though, Rocky Lalvani, he's a profit first expert. He teaches businesses how to get paid and make a profit a priority. In this episode, we're going to talk to Rocky about his upbringing and how being in an immigrant family impacted him. We're going to talk about how to make more and work less, what the importance of beginning with the end in mind and the evolution of your purpose in business, often why it starts for people, but how that evolves over time. We're going to talk about the 16 levers we can pull to improve our profitability, whether that's revenue or expenses or other things. We're also going to talk about what many of us have limiting beliefs around the value we can provide and how that impacts our pricing. Finally, the importance of how to keep score in business. You're going to love it. We really get into the details of financials and how to be more profitable, but we also talk mindset and the other stuff we love to talk about. So you're really going to enjoy this episode. Let's get into the interview. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur, or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode. We're very excited for this week's guest. We were talking a little bit on the pre-show, getting to know each other. Rocky Lalvani. Rocky, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Phil. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So for our listeners, Rocky is a chief profitability advisor for business owners. We were talking, he can teach the elementary stuff to business owners. He can teach the high school and he can teach the masters. So we're going to see if we can do a progression and if I could graduate or not. But I'm looking forward to the discussion. Certified Profit First Professional. So if you're familiar with the book Profit First, I read it. It's definitely a good book. We've modeled some things in our business from it, but I also told Rocky I'm going to learn some things today that I'm like, oh no, we didn't do this or we didn't do that. So I'm looking forward to learning it myself. Just a great guy, and Rocky, I'm looking forward to. Tell me before we get into the Profit First model and some of the things that really business owners and real estate investors can apply. Just tell me about yourself, your journey. How do we get to where we are today?
So I'm an immigrant. I came here when I was very young. My parents immigrated. They pretty much had to start over just because of the way life was back then. And one of the things they did was they would get together with their friends and figure out, how do you live the American dream? And one of the things they did was talk about money. So I just assumed everybody talked about money. And all of that friend group, everyone did relatively well in a fairly quick amount of time. So I got to see going from the wrong side of the tracks to how you progress up. And some of the people made lots and lots of money. So I got to see people at all different income levels. And I just always had a desire to be wealthy. I'm like, that looks good. I want the money. And so even as a kid, I was just always focused on how do I make money? How do I generate income and so forth. So very entrepreneurial from a young age. And then very much of a tech geek. So like when I was in high school, I was playing with spreadsheets when they were like brand new and just had come out. I was teaching accountants how to go from paper ledger over to spreadsheets. I just didn't understand the value that spreadsheets had. I didn't understand how to turn that into a business, even though I wanted to. I'm like, I just didn't know how to do all of those things. And back then, we didn't have podcasts, we didn't have the internet, we didn't
Right.
have these ways of
Resources. Yeah.
resources to figure out how to do that. And so I ended up with a job, and my job paid really well. I built wealth, and I always had side hustles on the side. I did real estate. I've flipped houses, have rentals, done all that stuff as well. And then I was always interested in personal finance, but I couldn't figure out how to turn personal finance into a business that worked for me. And then at some point, I got this aha, and part of it was the Profit First book. I'm like, what do you mean business owners don't understand the business of business? Like, how do you run a business and not understand how to make money? I mean, that just seems so absurd to me. And I started to investigate, and I'm like, wow, this is a real problem. It's one that I can solve. The story in Profit First is how I built my wealth. I was doing all those principles for years. So I got it. And I was like, one day I was like, you know what? Let's do this. And so I left the nice corporate cushy job and started a business, and never been happier in my life.
So two things. First of all, I want to go back to your story a little bit and your upbringing and your parents' friends. How much of the fact that that group of people and your parents had some level of success and financial success, it seemed like that was a result of their associations and their network in some way. Do you feel like that was the case where because they were talking about this on a regular basis, they all kind of grew together and figured this out together? Do you think that was the case or?
I think they already had done well in the prior country, but when you left and you came here, you couldn't bring money really with you. You could bring your knowledge. So I think they were a step ahead anyway. And then it was like, how do I apply that where I am today? How do I make it work here? And they all had the attitude that they were just going to be successful. So I think it
Yeah.
was a very much of that mindset. And
Yeah.
I didn't realize that just wasn't the norm, because
Yeah.
that's what I was seeing in my circle.
Yeah, very interesting. And I want to jump to this notion that, I there was a guest a few weeks ago where we talked about how there's so many people in the corporate world or, maybe a side hustle, as you said, where they know how to do a thing really, really well. And what we were talking about is like I was in the corporate world for a long time and I went from, you know, engineer to manager. But I knew how to be an engineer maybe, but I didn't know how to be a manager or a leader of people, right? So I've thought about this a lot in that context. Okay, so many people get elevated in their corporate role, in their business, in their profession to that management role, that first level of leadership, because they're good at what they did. That doesn't mean they're a good leader. Well, what you're
No,
saying is, okay, so many people, maybe they're good at doing a thing, fixing up a house. That doesn't mean they're a good owner of a business flipping up like a flipping company, right? They're not a good business owner. They can become one, but that doesn't just because they were good at the construction element of it or the hands-on element, it doesn't make them a good business owner. So what do you first of all, I think that's interesting, but what do you see as the major gaps from knowing the technical skill to being a good business owner? What are the gaps that people don't really understand?
so I think there's a lot of different areas, right? One that you talked about is simply when you got promoted at work, did anyone teach you how to be a manager?
There was classes. I would say that I was not a very good manager early in my career. I don't know if I ever qualified as a good one or not, Rocky, but
Okay.
I they did have classes and training there to help develop leaders, but yeah, that
Were they
doesn't mean
worthwhile?
honestly, There was different ones. There was probably the corporate sponsored one, maybe that weren't as good, but there was some very, very influential leadership training that I had there that I apply the principles still today. And then
Okay.
we tried to do our own thing where over time, as we brought people in, we had like monthly leadership book discussions and other things. But nonetheless, I think it's a combination of learning through reading and associations, but also you just got to do it to learn it. So.
Correct. So I think the first step for business owners is understanding the business of business. And what that means is you understand how to read a profit and loss statement. You understand how to read your balance sheet. You understand how to price your products. You understand the true cost of delivering your services and what that takes. Too often, people just equate the business to their pay. They forget about all the overhead that they have to carry. They forget that, oh, wait, now you have to pay taxes too. And they forget about that. And most people are optimistic. And so everything takes twice as long as they think it's going to take. Everyone, the biggest problem that business owners have is they think their product is the best in the world. It's their baby. Here's the thing, and I don't know if you have kids, but if your neighbor had a 4-year old kid running around screaming and yelling, would you like want to get away from that? Just because it's annoying, right? But that parent thinks that's the best kid in the world. Well, that's
Yeah.
how business owners think about whatever it is they're doing. Here's the thing, nobody cares about your baby, okay? And you got to get that emotion out of you. Business is very, very simple. Somebody has a problem, they want a solution. They don't care what the solution is, they just want to trust that it works. Most business owners are doing nothing but talking about how great their solution is. They're not talking about the problem. They're not talking about the resolution in the desired state. Okay. Most people don't realize that's not what people are buying. So
So,
people aren't buying a drill. People are buying the whole, and they're not buying the whole. They're buying what the whole can then create that they
right,
particularly need, which is
right,
I want a beautiful painting to look at in my
right.
living room. And in order to do that, I need to put some screws in the wall. The drill is irrelevant, but yet it's
Yeah.
needed.
So I want to do a little example here. But so first of all, I was going to ask, as you were talking about understanding P&L, understanding balance sheet, pricing, and value, and but a lack of understanding, I think, of expenses, especially overhead. Right? People look at
Mhm.
direct costs so often, but they miss and I think especially early on, this can cause real problems. But all of a sudden you realize, oh, I got to change my pricing model. Um, but I think we think about it cost plus a lot of time, pricing model versus value. So I was going to suspect that people undervalue themselves at first. Do they undervalue themselves? And
Yes.
how do you like? So how do you identify what that value is? And how do you like you're talking a little bit, I think, about solution selling here, right? Where, okay, what's the
Yes.
problem? And not here's the product to fix it, but what does the solution feel like to you, right? So talk me through an example that maybe even for your business, like what are you really selling? Or
Hmm.
talk us through the process and how would you do that for even what you're doing?
So in my business, really what it's about is why did you go into business? Right? There was a reason you started the business. And for most people, it's freedom, right? They might want to make an impact in the world. They want flexibility. Maybe they think they can do it better than where they're working, and they want to make money, right?
Yeah.
So that's why they went into business. So we focus on that. How do we help you to make more and work less? Because the truth is, most people leave their job and end up making less and working twice as hard in business.
Yes.
And that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Does does this, I want to stay there for a second. So why did you start the business? Freedom, impact, flexibility, love all those things. is the question, so why did you start, but also why are you doing it now? Like, does this
Yeah.
why, doesn't it evolves over time for business owners typically? Is that true or no?
It can. It depends if the business owner evolves. Some people don't evolve, right? Somebody just might say, I like building decks and I'm just going to keep building decks. That's what I know how to do. That's what I want to do. And that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Okay. Build decks. Nothing wrong with it.
Right. Yeah. I think if a business owner is if they started with the reason to look, I enjoy doing the trade of this, building decks, and I want to provide for my family, and they're
Mhm.
getting that, and they don't want anything more than that, and they're focused on their family and they're providing and all those things. That is okay. But there's also,
Yeah.
I think for those listening, if you started a business, if you just started a business, if you have a side hustle, whatever it is, you should get clarity. Okay, why am I really doing this? And so now, okay, we have some clarity on why we're doing this, whatever that is. How do we start to build that? Like, how are we thinking about this, especially from a financial model, I think is what we'll get into to support what we want, right?
Right. So here's what happens. I'm the deck builder, and we'll just stay on the deck builder. The deck builder goes, okay, um, the deck boards cost $10,000. So there's $10,000 in material. It's going to take me a week to build it. And I deserve $35 an hour or $50 an hour. And so 50 times 40 is 2,000 and 10,000 for deck boards. I'm going to charge $12,000. It's like, whoa, time out. Um, you have to pay taxes, right? You forgot about that. What about your insurance? What about the truck? What about the phone? What about all these other things? Maybe you have an answering service. Maybe you have a website. Maybe you had to spend $300 on marketing to get that deal. Did you forget about all those costs? Did you add that in to the cost of building the deck? Now, even though I'm the single guy building the deck and I think I get $2,000 an hour that or a week, now we hire a guy. Well, when you hire the guy, he's not going to build the deck as fast as you. He's not going to do everything the way you did it. So now it takes a week and a quarter. But you only charged what you thought you should get for that because you've got a limiting belief about how much people are willing to pay. You're like, no one's going to pay me 20,000 for this deck. The reality is people might pay you 30,000 for the deck, but you didn't realize that, right?
Yeah.
And so you forget all of the things that can go wrong, the extra material you might need because something didn't go perfect, the customer changes their mind. All of that stuff has to get factored in, the cost of the permits, the insurance. And then when you start hiring people, you really have to mark the people way up because they are not efficient. You have to pay both sides of their taxes. There's all these additional costs that start coming in. And the other thing is, I think a lot of times they just feel like they don't, nobody will pay them. Like that's
Well,
ridiculous.
and I think again back to the undervaluing, and I think especially when people are starting, they're saying, "Well, I'll figure this out later. Right now, all I'm doing, I'll hustle. I'll figure
Yeah.
out the profitability later, and I think these are my costs, but I just need to get some momentum and get some customers." Is
Yeah.
that okay? Like, is that okay to start it and change it later? Or is like, no, you're just setting yourself up for a bad situation,
So here's my question. When are you going to change? Like when?
right?
Is it deck four? Is it 6 months? Is it 6 years? When?
Yeah,
What happens is we start to get busy. And then we're like, well, I've got all this revenue coming in, so it'll all work out.
right,
And then it doesn't start to work out. Well, then I just need more revenue. No, your business model is broken. Every time you build a deck, you lose money.
right.
There's
So
no
how do
way you're going to fix that.
Yeah. So I mean, how do we, how, like pricing 101, like how do we price it then? How do we price this deck? How do we think about this? Is it cost plus or is it no, do the homework, understand your value proposition in that route?
I think it's do the homework, understand your value proposition, and go that route. Cost plus, you're always going to be fighting for margin, right? And you don't even know. It's not always easy to determine the costs. It's not always easy to guess the hours correctly. And that's the other thing. If you're going cost plus and you're guessing at everything, have you ever sat down after the project and said, how much did it really cost? And how much time did it really take?
Yeah.
Because if you don't know that, you might be very, very off on your estimate.
Yeah,
And
there.
again, your people aren't going to work at the rate you work.
Right. There's a buddy of mine. This is a long time ago, but they were flipping houses and they did the math after a couple like, oh, we're making, I don't know, 10 grand, 20 grand on these houses. And then they did the math after one of them for their dollar per hour rate. They said, okay, we made 10 grand, 20 grand, whatever it was, but I wonder how much we made per hour doing this. And they kind of tracked all their time throughout the process. And it was a ridiculously low number. And they're like, why didn't I
Yeah.
just go get a bartending job or do something like that where I could have made 2, 3x, right? If I would have worked as many hours. Now they learned a lot in that process. So there's some value to that. But, um, understanding the value you're providing. And then also I think maybe that's a transition to how, so what they did is they said, okay, this is what we're doing. This is how much we made. We made 20 grand, but if we hired this out, we make 10 grand of profit, but our hour dollars per hour goes through the roof because we did a different structure. So when do we, if we've started to price this properly now, how we start thinking about our expenses and even scaling and providing freedom, flexibility, those types of things.
I think you begin with the end in mind. So when we sit down and we work with a business owner, we have three drivers. The three drivers are driving revenue, driving profit, driving cash flow. All three of those are not equal. And within those three drivers, there are 16 levers. And we look at each of the levers to say, which lever should we use that gives us the maximum return for the least amount of effort? And
I like,
so let's look at that deck project. The first lever might simply be we're incorrectly pricing. So we need to raise our prices. And that might fix everything. And then we'll come back later. And now that we fixed our prices, we might need to hit the marketing lever. Oh, we need to put more marketing dollars behind that. And we need to make sure that our marketing works. So are we getting a return on our marketing? That's a different lever. The other thing with those is, okay, I sold a deck. Now I sold it for 20,000. Woohoo, I'm great. When are you getting paid? Like, what is your payment structure on that deck? Do you get money up front? Does the money up front cover all the materials? Do you take an intermediate payment? And then is your final payment rather small? And the reason we do that, especially in the trades, you get into a fight at the end, you don't want a whole lot of your money tied up in that fight. So you might get in a fight on that deck over a piece of railing that's $100 and they're holding up $5,000 payment. That's
yeah,
absurd.
yeah,
And now all your time is going into fighting. You're
yeah.
not going to make the next deck. You're mad. Life is horrible. This is not what we went into business for.
Yeah. So just cash management, days payable, days sales outstanding, all those things extremely important. The trades
Yes.
industry, I remember when we were starting doing this, and there's contractors that are so hell bent on getting paid super quick. And I'm like, we paid quick, but like they wanted paid that day.
Yeah.
But the reason for it isn't they needed that money like paycheck to paycheck necessarily from their perspective, maybe, but not necessarily. The reason is they've been burned too many times. And I didn't even have that frame of reference. Like, of course I'm going to pay you. Like, yeah, let me write the check. I don't have it with me. Like, no, go get the checkbook, pay me now. But I think, especially in the trades industry, there's a lot of people that aren't getting paid for whatever reason. And if you're, so there's so many people running these types of businesses, but they don't have the systems, the processes to get paid promptly. So
They don't invoice. I cannot tell you how much I chase down my vendors, go, hey, let me pay you. I need an invoice because I want to
yes,
close out the flip.
correct.
And
Yes,
I can tell you, because I deal with all of this stuff, we've got contractors that don't bill out for 2 or 3 months. I'm
yeah,
like, are you out of your mind?
Right.
Are you rich? I didn't know
Yeah.
you were that wealthy.
Yeah. And I would
Yeah.
tell business owners, you need to be doing that. If you're not if your vendors aren't getting you their invoices, you need to be knocking on their door saying, "Hey, we need to get you paid."
I stopped doing that.
Yeah? Tell me more
Yeah.
about that.
You think he's going to remember 3 months later? They forget to invoice you.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you want to
Yeah.
get paid, do your job.
Yeah.
Tell
What?
me what the bill is and I'll pay you. But
Yeah.
you got to learn to get this down because
Yeah.
people are going to forget.
Yeah. They
And
are. I
then
agree.
and then is the number right, wrong, whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah, here's the reality. The longer you take the invoice, the less likely you get paid.
Yeah. And I'm maybe a little bit different. Like, hey, you maybe ask about it, but I get the point. It's not your job to continuously follow up and chase it down.
No.
I like doing it for the same reason. One, I just want to get it done, but also I want to keep the books clean on our side so that when we get the work done, we're basically paying in a short period of time within the payment terms for sure, just so that there's consistency of the P&L versus these invoices stacking up, and all of a sudden in March we have just a huge pile of expenses that look weird on the P&L and just stand out. So 16 levers. Are the levers within revenue 16 and then within expenses? So it's 16 total levers.
16 total levers. They're about equal, 555
Yep.
roughly
So
in
what are
each of the buckets.
so what are some of the other levels? So you talked some revenue levers, but what are some other
So
levers?
we start with lead flow. What does lead flow look like? How do your leads then convert into sales? So now we're looking the measure of your conversion, your sales process. The question is, was it good leads, bad leads, incorrect leads? And then how often do your clients buy? And how much are they the average sale? And then do you have repeat customers? So all of that is just driving revenue.
So how important are, a lot of people are measuring financials only, like balance sheet, P&L, cash flow. They're looking at those metrics, but they're
No, they're
not
not.
looking,
They're
well,
not looking at most of that.
okay. You if they're looking at anything, they're hopefully looking at those three items.
They're
But
looking at one. Most people, first of all, 80% of business owners only do one thing. They look at their bank account. If there's money, they spend. If there's no money, they don't. Second step, they look at their P&L, and all they do is go right to the bottom. Did I make profit? Did I not make profit? They might look at a balance sheet, but here's the thing. The way balance sheets are designed and the way they're supposed to be read is not the format that they're handed to you. So they hand you
uh,
the balance sheet for today. Go,
yeah,
oh, my balance sheet's wonderful. Compared to what?
yeah,
I look at a balance sheet month to month to month to month, and
love
I
it,
look for the change in the balance sheet, which is not
100%.
shown anywhere. It's
No,
like, where's
you have to
Waldo?
look for it in QuickBooks. You have to look for it. I do the same exact thing because, and I think if people printed a balance sheet and they don't really understand this, they'll look at a balance sheet and they'll be confused, like it's a balance sheet versus a P&L or something like.
Right.
But this is the change in balance over time. But it's extreme. Like, okay, my payables are in a way better spot than they were a year ago, or my account balance, or my whatever it is. I can see the change over time. I'm getting healthier, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting less healthy based on my balance sheet. And I think what you're saying, the other thing you were saying is people. So bank account, I agree with that. That's good. P&L, but you left out and I think this is very accurate. People are not looking at studying and understand their cash flow statement either. They're stopping at the P&L and oh, I'm profitable. But that doesn't P&L, it doesn't stop there.
No, and that's why everyone goes, the accountant said I was profitable last year, but I have no cash. Yeah, because the P&L, the profit doesn't equal cash. And that's part of the problem. There's a whole bunch of reasons. Most of your cash disappears on the balance sheet.
Yeah.
If you run a cash flow statement in QuickBooks, good luck. I mean, it is so confusing to understand and read, and it's just a bit of a struggle. The other thing is 90% of book, I would say 90 plus percent of businesses don't have the type of bookkeeping that will give them the right answers in a timely fashion. And
What Go
that's the
ahead, finish your
problem.
thought. What so
Yeah.
what is the right what is the right way? Like what is the right structure? I mean, without, you know,
First of all, it's timely entry of everything, right? Like we were talking about, oh, you don't have something for 3 months. Well, then your numbers are off.
right.
The other thing is people talk about cash versus accrual accounting. This gets really confusing, but here's the bottom line. You want your expenses and your revenue to match up at the same time. So let's say we do the deck. Let's say I get a 50% deposit today. We're in March, but I don't start the deck till April. Well, then in March, it looks like I made all this money. In April, I got to pay for the 50% pays all the expenses. So in April, it looks like I broke even. I didn't go anywhere. And then in May, I get the other 50% because I finished the job and it looks like I made all this money. It's like, well, why am I making money in March and May, but I'm losing money in April? It's because things are not tied together.
Yeah.
And so that's what accrual accounting does. It ties things together. The other thing is certain things don't appropriately show up in the bookkeeping. So for example, you bought that fancy truck because of course you needed the fancy truck to build the deck because you can't build a deck without a fancy $100,000 truck. Um, you're paying for the truck on a loan, and every month you're paying $1,000. But out of the $1,000, 800 is interest and 200 is principal against the loan, or
Right.
maybe it's actually the other way. Maybe 500 is interest and 500 is principal. Only 500 is going to show up on the P&L. But if your bookkeeper's just putting $1,000 in, it's not showing up on your balance sheet. And
Yep.
so all of these technical things that nobody wants to deal with, and I don't blame you, skew the results that you're seeing. And
Yeah.
then at the end of the year, the CPA comes and goes, we're going to write off the truck. So then they write off $100,000. So I didn't make any taxes. So yay. But now I have no cash. And next year I have no deductions. And it's a roller coaster. So it's understanding how these things all flow together
Yep.
and the choices that are made. And here's the reality for most businesses, they don't value the bookkeeping and they're not willing to pay for it. But when you don't have a clear scoreboard and you don't have clear numbers, then you're in trouble. And that's why Profit First is so cool because Profit First works for people who don't know how to do bookkeeping. You get
Yeah.
real cash flow measurements.
Yeah, and I know I read it a few years ago. It had a big impact again how we thought through it and how we structured it and our business and just ensuring like we're structured to okay, set up a budget, distributions, and how do we ensure we can hit those metrics. So, but there's way more there, and I think the main message from that last discussion, I was starting to take us down a rabbit hole of sales metrics and marketing metrics and other things, and those are important. And I would just say like having systems to accurately measure how you're doing things is so important, and just start measuring. And even, I mean, read the book, check it out, but even if you're not measuring the right things, start measuring it and seeing trends, and you'll realize, okay, this wasn't the right metric, but I'll switch to this. We're using like we have a weekly meeting where we go through all of our lead metrics that are driving our business, and just seeing the change in those over time. By the way, if you're making progress and doing good things and the team's engaged in that, I also think that adds a lot of value. They're seeing progress, they're seeing how things are going in the right direction. So just as you implement things, first of all, understand the basics, not just the bank account, but P&Ls, cash flow statements, balance sheet by month. Love that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of business owners are allergic to the numbers, and that's perfectly fine. Put somebody on your
Yeah.
team to do this for you.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to do this. A lot of business owners don't like this part of the business. That's fine.
Right.
Who can help you get it done so that you can make the choices? Bottom line is, many of you probably have kids, and if you've got kids and they play in sports, and it's one of those leagues where there's no scoreboard, you're like, really? And yet, if you've got a business and you have no scoreboard, I'm going to be like, really?
Yeah.
How do you know where you're at? How do you know if you're winning or losing or what's going on if you don't have a scoreboard?
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. All of those levers are your scoreboard.
Yeah.
They tell
And,
you the
and
future and the past and the current.
yeah. And for me, that's a good just reminder for me because I'm a numbers guy. I enjoy seeing this stuff,
You're an
understanding this
engineer.
stuff. Uh, I know. I sat. We went to the first four game at the University of Dayton last night, and I sat by an engineer that is in real estate as well. And I apologized to his wife for my condolences to his wife for having married an engineer because I understand what that's like. But back to the point. Um, if you don't know the numbers, if that's not of interest, put the right people around you, build your team for somebody that can tell you the numbers, tell you the metrics and then you just build your strategy around them. But you need to know numbers around the key, first start with the financials, but then you can start to add on to that too. And if you get the right person, they'll help you have real-time data, I think is extremely important for you and your team. What are some items from a business leadership perspective or business perspective, maybe not so, other things just business owners are missing, maybe not, so all the profit and financial stuff, but okay, let's move that to a side. You work with a lot of different business owners. What are some other big things that business leaders need to be aware of that they're missing?
So it comes back to what you talked about. You said, "Hey, I became a manager, but I wasn't a great manager." Um, I don't think most business owners are good at managing people, right? They they hire somebody and say, "Well, I hired you. You should know what to do." Most business owners have all this knowledge in their head, but they're not great at getting the knowledge out of their head and into the person. They
Yeah.
don't have the systems and processes to follow. So let's look at McDonald's. You go to McDonald's, wherever you go, it is always relatively the same process, right? They can plug and play people into it. You walk
Sure.
into McDonald's and go, I want a pizza. Are you getting one? No. They don't
Right.
go, oh, you need a pizza? Let me figure out how to make you a pizza. I got a
Right.
kitchen, right? No.
Yeah.
They go, we don't sell pizza. This is our system. This is what we do. Everything is by the book. We cook the fries for however many minutes, and then we take them out, and we next step is put salt on them. And we've got three different sizes, and we use this scoop for this and this for that, and everything is systematized.
Yeah. And I
And
think
most
that
business owners don't do that.
the other thing that business owners do is they build a deck and they're like, okay, I built three of them, but I want other business. I'm gonna go put siding on, even though I don't know anything about siding, and I'm gonna go do this and that. And they shiny object syndrome because I can make a little bit of money versus staying focused on what they're good at. And I am guilty as charged, trust me. But I've also learned I don't know if business owners have to go through that process to get the right setback to bring you back to what you know and do well, because that's kind of the process I went through, honestly. Um, but I just think there's so much value in really bringing focus for you, your team. There's so much minutia and stuff that you bring in by just these little distractions, where if you stay focused on what you're good at, you can be really profitable, which is what we're talking about. And I think systems, process, people management, people leadership, I think are also important. What would you say is your leadership style?
I like numbers. People drive me crazy. I don't, we automate and systematize, and I don't want to have to deal with that.
You know what? There is value in self-awareness, Rocky, and I love that answer. It's like, I like numbers, not people. You called me an engineer. I didn't say that. I didn't say I like numbers and not people. I just said I like numbers, Rocky. And I like some people. How about that? Is that fair?
I and I think business owners relate to this. You you ask someone to do something, they agree to do it, just do it. If you need help, call me, but don't ask me the same question 12 times,
Yeah.
right? You're supposed to do X, do X. I don't want to hear excuses. And I think that's the way business owners are. So I have learned to figure out, A, do I really need somebody to do this, or is this a worthless task? Because we have lots of worthless tasks around us.
Yeah.
And then how do I systematize it first? How do I then teach somebody how to do it so that I don't have to be involved in every step? And how do we build a self learning system so that over time, the system keeps getting better and better and better so
Yeah.
that we have less and less of these issues? And then how do we have a dashboard to track everything
Right.
and
So I
making sure everything flows when it's supposed to?
So this sounds, first of all, you talked about business owners not wanting to do this or hiring it out or finding it, but man, that sounds expensive. I mean, so there's a lot of different ways that this can be done. Is it a part-time bookkeeper? Is it a CPA firm? Is it fractional CFOs? Is it like there? Because for the business owners are like, yeah, that sounds good, but I just have to do it because it's going to be way too expensive for me. What are the different ways to get help here?
I think it depends on the size of your business, right? If you've got if you're low six figures, you might be doing it yourself or your spouse is doing the books or whatever. You start getting bigger than that, you need to start getting people on board. Again, what I recommend, just because, again, my whole attitude of people drive me crazy, I'd rather hire somebody to do it than try to have them come in house. Because most business owners aren't going to know how to teach the bookkeeper, are they? No. So hire a bookkeeping firm that's good.
Yeah,
You can find one at a reasonable rate. And then
agreed.
sit down and have a conversation with them and say, how do I make your job easier so you don't charge me more?
Yep. Agreed. And we've done it, but we're looking into, so we're doing it. We're doing it in house. I like the financials. At the same time, it's
That's
becoming more
fine.
of my time.
Yes.
And it's the most strategic things I can be doing are not setting up systems or reviewing. Of course, I'm going to review the financials, but there's people that can get it there for me. I can review them, understand the business, and be focused
Yeah.
on strategic sales, leadership, culture, vision, other things that I think are way more impactful if I have the systems and processes in place so that this stuff is more automated and done for me. So we're working on the next phase, but I know it's different for all different business owners. If you so you work with a lot of different businesses. You've helped people go from red to black, I'm sure, in a lot of different cases. So if you step back and reflect on what you do, how does it make you feel?
I love what I do. I love helping people make money and work less. Too much of what you hear out there is drive revenue, more and more revenue. But most of these people are grinding. This whole grinding attitude just silly. There's no reason for it.
How do you work less? Because I think so many people are in the dollar per hour mindset and they think about it that way. But just real quick, is it all the things we talked about, or are there other ways to be thinking about how do we work less?
It is literally taking everything you do and turning it into a systematic process that becomes easier and easier to do. So you're just constantly refining it. And so you take the deck, how do I design the deck quicker? How do I lay out a deck as fast as possible? Maybe there's parts of the deck that I'm not that great at, so I sub that part out. Maybe we sub out demo to somebody else because they're
Yeah.
great at demo. Maybe I sub out the framing of the deck to someone else because they're really great at framing. And then we just come drop our deck boards down. But here's my question. What's the fastest way to lay out those deck boards? What's the fastest way to cut them? What's the fastest way to get through that? What's the best fastener to use? And we're just talking about decks here, but if you go into a more complicated system or business, how do you make it easier and easier? Every year, it becomes easier and easier for me to deliver to my clients
And I think
because I build the systems.
what I think is important about the building, turn everything into a system is the earlier you start that, the easier it is. If you're 20 decks in, you're like, how do I unwind and figure this out and like build a system around this now? If you're thinking systems and processes as you're starting and how can I just fine tune and automate and set up everything for other people to do, it's going to be so much. We were ridiculous with our second house, third house, and trying to set up these management systems, but you know, our systems have evolved dramatically, but having that mindset early on, I think, is important just to build those systems, processes that you can leverage and other people can leverage as well. So, and I think as a business leader, then what that can lead to is if you have the right financial systems, processes, business systems in place, it allows you to step out more. And if it's freedom, if it's flexibility, if it's impact, it helps you get back to your why of why you got into this in the first place. So.
It does. And let's face it, I've noticed when people work less and have lots of cash, they just seem happier, less stressed, no anxiety. You know what else they tell me? They go, "Oh, we got this client that possibly came in, but there were all these red flags." And we're like, "No, thank you." But when they're starving for money, they're like, "Oh, I got to take that client." And it turns into pure hell.
Yeah, yeah, agreed, agreed. Well, I want to wrap up a couple of closing questions here. What do you think is going to be like your key to continued success for what you're doing specifically? And I want to get into that more and how our listeners can find out more about you. But like, how are you going to continue to be successful yourself?
I just have fun. I do what I love. Like, this is what I love doing. If I didn't get paid, I'd still do this probably.
Yeah. And you've set up the model to allow you to do it. You've set up the
Yeah.
businesses, the systems to allow you to do that, right? I mean, that's the powerful thing about that statement is that that's why you did it in the first place. And maybe it evolves as we talked about, but man, you got to enjoy what you're doing. And if you're not, you got to figure out something you got to figure out something different and then find it and build the systems, processes, and the profit first model to make it work. So,
Everything I don't enjoy, I get off my plate.
yeah. What has been a really, really impactful book, podcast, resource that has just had a really significant impact on your life or on your mindset?
Um, that's a wide question because I read a ton. And so, you've got the world of business books, but then you've got the whole level of books that are much more on the psychology or mindset or other areas that really go in. On
That's
the
a,
business side, I think every business owner should read The Road Less Stupid. It literally has hundreds of questions for you to ask yourself about how do I make my business better? What are all the things that I need to think about to improve within my business? And so I think that's a big part of it from the business side.
so that's good. But now I want to ask the mindset and psychology because I love this stuff and I find
Ooh,
myself reading these more and more. And I just, while you think about that for the listeners, I mean, the first thing I saw, his Rocky's bookshelf is behind him, and there's all kinds of great books behind it that I'm seeing and recognizing, and a lot of them that I'm not. So I got some work to do. But um,
yeah. You know, that whole side, there is just so many different genres of books at so many different levels. And they hit you at different points in your life. Like you might read it at one point and go, I don't get it. And then you come back 4 years later and you're like, oh my God, what did I miss there?
mhm.
And I think a lot of it is just the inner development to let go of everything, let go of expectations, let go of outcomes, and just say, I'm going to do what I can do today, and I'm going to do the best I can. And I'm going to let go of all the noise in my head.
Yeah, I
And
love that.
that's the biggest thing. Nobody
I love
talks
it.
about the noise in their head. You're your own worst critic.
Yeah.
Let
Who
go of
talks to you more than who talks to
it.
you more than anyone else, right?
Yeah.
Clearly yourself. So, and I, the concept of letting go, right? Do what you can do. Try, put the effort in, but disconnect from the result. Focus on what you've done and then let go of the result. It's feedback, but let it go, and that will reduce stress, anxiety, and all those other things. So, amazing stuff, Rocky. I really appreciate it. How can our listeners, how can they find out more about you?
So if you want, the website is profitcomesfirst.com. And from there, you'll find our podcast. We have one that's very much on the tactical side. How do I make more money? And then we have another one that's on the softer side of life to answer the other questions that we barely touched on. And so it's a balance of the two. And you can find it all at profitcomesfirst.com.
Love it. And love it. And I love the combo of the tactical and the softer stuff. The softer stuff is not easy. It's not soft, it's hard, but it's important stuff as well. Rocky, thanks so much. We covered a lot. I really, really appreciate it. For the Moeller and Real Estate Business Podcast, signing off. Thank you. Hey everyone, we really hope you enjoyed today's interview. Thanks again for all the support as we transition to the Purpose Matrix and try to impact as many lives as we can. Make sure to follow the Purpose Matrix as the new episodes will be coming out very, very soon. For the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast, we are officially signing off. Thank you for listening to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Moeller Real Estate, visit our website at www.moellerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life. Educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.